everybody. So glad to see you here. I'm Elizabeth Thompson, the producer of the Sustainability Lab's conversation series, and it's just fantastic that there's so many of you here on our Zoom platform and also joining us on our Facebook live stream. Today, we are going to focus on combating desertification and why it is so critically important. And we're very honored to host a conversation with Dr. Michael Ben-Eli, the founder of the Sustainability Laboratory, and renowned ecologist, Professor Uriel Safriel. Professor Safriel is a professor emeritus of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Previously, he has been the director of the Blaustein Institutes for Desert Research at Ben-Gurion University and chair of the Committee of Science and Technology and co-chair of the Science Policy Interface of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. I will put a link to his bio in the chat for you to pursue and peruse further. So before we get started with our conversation, we're going to share with you a very short video about the Sustainability Laboratory. Our planet is in distress. Persistent, insensitive human activities now threaten every vital component of the biosphere, including the well-being of our own species. We are faced with a choice: continuous deterioration or a commitment to sustainability. Transitioning from the current state of affairs to a sustainable basis is an unprecedented challenge. There is no blueprint to guide us. We need bold experimentation with new ways of thinking and acting. This is why we established the Sustainability Laboratory, a global platform for sustainability innovations, a catalyst inspiring positive change. In our development projects, we work collaboratively with communities to bring about sustainability-related transformations. In our education initiatives, we help train future leaders to tackle the urgent sustainability issues facing the planet. And in our research projects, we foster groundbreaking innovations in technology. This is the Sustainability Laboratory, aiming to expand prospects and produce positive, life-affirming impacts on people and ecosystems in all parts of the world, joining with others to ensure a transition to a sustainable future.
Hello, Uriel. It's really such a great pleasure to have you here on this session. I know you and I over the years have so many conversations about desertification and the issues that are involved. So it's really great that to have this opportunity to share your thoughts with many others. But before we start, it would be great if you could share with our audience a sense of who you are, of your own personal path. Why did you choose biology as an area of interest? How did you get involved with desertification? What are key milestones on your way, mentors, inspirational moments, and so forth? And also, recently I watched the presentation that you gave about the Association of Young Nature Lovers that you launched many years ago with a group of friends, all very, very young children. I thought it was such an inspiring story that I hope to hear about that as well as you talk to us about yourself. Please go ahead.
I was born in the emerging city of Tel Aviv prior to the emergency of Israel, and next to a rural neighborhood in which I used to stroll with my dog anytime that I could get away from my elementary school, which I hated. This until a new teacher arrived in the 4th grade to teach agriculture and natural history. In his first lesson, as he started, he made a simple chart on the blackboard into which he scribbled a stork and a sparrow, and then posed the question, why the stork has long legs and long bill, and the sparrow short legs and small thick bill. And then after some time, nobody knew, and he gave the answer. Each of them is adapted to a different habitat and a different food. I was stunned. In my strolls with my dog, I encountered some storks and many, many sparrows. But what this teacher did in the 10 minutes with a small chart on the blackboard, I cannot say that he changed my life, but surely he made me wishing to be a scientist and to strive to research nature. Following this event, I started to watch birds, their behavior, and recorded in the field my observation in small notebooks. And I even published a paper on one of my observations in a children's journal. Then other pupils in the class joined me in my outings until 11 of us, of 11 years of age each, decided and declared to form a youth movement similar to the youth movements in young Israel, each of which has then belonged to a different political party. But we decided that our movement, which we called the Association of Animal Lover Youngsters, would be a non-political one. And this association has been active as a small and very specific youth movement 10 years and dispersed when the founders were recruited to the army and then went to universities, a period during which about 100 youngsters functioned as members of this association, and about nearly a score of them became natural science professors and nature conservation professionals. Then, already in the Hebrew University, I was offered to head a desert ecology department in Israel's Institute of Desert Research, which I was happy to take as an opportunity to live in desert and study the desert. And eventually, I became the director of that institute. And in addition, I also functioned as the chief scientist of Israel Authority of Nature Conservation. This last position led me getting involved in desertification. And this is quite a bizarre circumstance. The story is that following a huge forest fire in an Israeli national park, I was asked as chief scientist to assemble a scientist team that will recommend the government how to avoid forest fires. In one of my regular report meetings with a government officer that followed the activity of the team, he suddenly asked me if I know what is desertification. I did not know much, but I answered positively. And then he told me that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs received a request from the UN to send an Israeli delegate to the first meeting of the negotiating committee for establishing the UNCCD. And he asked me if I will agree to do that. Before answering if I want or not, I asked him where the meeting is to take place. And he said, Nairobi. Wow, I have never been in an African savanna and have never watched its unique biodiversity. And I immediately agreed. So this is the beginning. And I started dealing with the desertification in that Nairobi meeting in 1994. And ever since, I represented Israel in all UNCCD functions until 2015, when I resigned from my last position in the desert community, desertification community, which was chairing, chairing the UNCCD Committee of Science and Technology, and establishing and co-chairing also a novel UNCCD body, the Science Policy Interface, called the SPI. But what is for me more important than desertification is that throughout my 30 years of teaching in the Department of Ecology and Evolution of the Hebrew University, I guided about 50 second degree and third degree ecology students, some of which are by now already ecology professors in Israeli universities, and other in positions in nature conservation and environmental institutions.
This is a fantastic story, and I think this personal aspect only indicates how much in one's career is driven by completely unforeseen events and unpredictable or unplanned circumstances. So good, that gets us into our subject for today, desertification, how to combat it, and so forth. So let's get on with the presentation itself. And basically obviously one important issue that relates to the adverse impact of human activities on the biosphere has to do with what came to be called desertification. So what does the term itself actually mean?
Okay, we will start with it. So indeed, desertification. What is it? Where? Why? And what can be done? So before I answer this question, what is it? I will put another question, and this, what is it not? It is not the advancement of the desert. That this is not an area in which you see sand and dust coming from something, a way to cover the whole area that you see in this photo. What it is really, desertification, is a reduction in land productivity with no rainfall reduction, and especially in areas where productivity is limited by water, but rainfall is scarce and variable. And you can see some example of it in this picture and the graph that shows the rainfall variability in an area of North South Africa that has a lot of rangeland areas. And this land in this rain data were collected from this area. And also what was measured there is the rangeland productivity, which is measured by biomass per units of area and units of time. And this was done in a specific area that you see here, the green circle in this area. When it was measured through the 17 years of this chart, this is what was found. You have here undulating curve of biomass, which is productivity of the land, and it is following exactly the rainfall. But in another place that is close to the green, place here, this one next to it, also they measure the productivity. This place is also having the same rain as the other one. And what they found then, it is this, which means that in two places very close together, it is possible to have a situation of reduced productivity as expressed by the red curve. Now, what is the difference between these two circles, the red and the green? The green is on the white part of this map, and the red one is on the dark part. And this is actually the land of the homelands in South Africa during the apartheid. And the other one is the rangelands of the white people that didn't have so much problems like the red ones. So the first thing that we can say about desertification is that there are social, economic, and policy systems that affect land use, but that may lead to land degradation, these different land use. And therefore, we define desertification in persistent reduction in land productivity. It is not only just reduction in land productivity, but it is persistent, as we see it is along these 17 years, and with no rainfall decline, in the same rainfall. And this happens in drylands. All this map of the northern part of South Africa is a dryland area. So land degradation in drylands is desertification.
Desertification then is defined in relation to drylands. Drylands obviously in itself represents a broad category. So help us understand what exactly are drylands and how they are distributed around the world.
Okay, fine. Drylands, indeed. You will be surprised if I tell you that here the arrow shows this area, and another arrow, the other area. Both of them are drylands. And what is connecting between them? That precipitation, the rainfall that they get is at least 1.5 times lower than what that is lost to what we call evapotranspiration, to transpiration from the plants of the trees and evaporation from the land. So this is actually a kind of an indicator of which is a climatic feature of rainfall and evaporation. And this climatic feature is influencing a biological feature. The biological feature is biological productivity. So the biological productivity in drylands is limited by soil moisture only. And this is the major limitation, means that they cannot do without it. And here you can see where are the drylands of the world. Everything that is white in this map is not a dryland. And here again, everyone that is not dryland, its precipitation is at least 1.5 times lower than the evapotranspiration. And we can have also the exact measure that aridity index, what is called aridity index, that precipitation divided by evapotranspiration is smaller than 0.65. So all these lands, anything of any area of them is in this area of lower, that the aridity index is lower than 0.65. So here is the aridity gradient, and we can see it here. This is a dry subhumid. It is not very dry. Here is semi-arid. Here is already arid. And this area is the Sahara, and this is hyper-arid. Now we can also see with the dimensions of the different drylands. First of all, 41% of the global land are drylands. And also 35% of global population live in drylands. But when we asked what is drylands, we already know, but now where is the desert? We know what is desertification, but where is the desert? The desert is the arid and the hyper-arid dryland together. There are desert dryland, 17% of this 41%, and the others that are not so dry are dry subhumid and semi-arid. They are 24% of the 41 global land. And where is desertification? Okay, now already we know where are the drylands and what they are, and where is the desertification.
So the dryland and desertification, the interplay between dryland and desertification seems to involve a whole complex of interactions. Of some key aspects include population and intensity of activity and soil productivity and soil sensitivity to disruption and overexploitation and so on. So how do these factors interrelate?
Here is the curve of desertification along the aridity index, along the aridity index, and we see that there is very low desertification in the deserts, in hyper-arid and arid area. But then it is going up, and the highest amount of desertification is the percentage of the desertification is in the semi-arid area of the non-desert dryland. This is how it looks. Now the question is, what makes it look like this? Then we have to use also another variable, important variable. This is population size in square per kilometer, in meter in persons square kilometer. And then the population sizes look like this, and the pressure that people put on the land that make the land desertified, we can show that it is similar to what happens with the wheels of the car that is put pressure on the land by going on this land. And therefore, you can see here that when the area is dry subhumid, the least humid, and then very little dry, the signs of the wheels pressure on the land quickly are erased. Nobody will know that this car was driving there. But if it drives from the dry subhumid to the semi-arid and to the arid and to the hyper-arid, then it is the sensitivity of the land is very different, and therefore the signs of the wheels pressure stay forever, which means that the sensitivity of the land here is very high, and the sensitivity to pressure of the car and of the people, and at the other side, the sensitivity is very low. And if we do a simple, small mathematical model, we see that the desertification curve values, they follow the population size, the pressure, multiplied by the land sensitivity values. And indeed, this is the area, and this is the relations between the sensitivity of the area and the population density of the area, that it is the highest, the semi-arid is highest compared to all the others. Here we see that what population growth has been between 1990 and 2000 in percentage. You see on the right the land productivity measured by plants kilogram per square meter per year, and we see here the drylands. The drylands indeed have very low very low productivity, inherent, natural. But here is the size of the population in this region between 1990 to 2000, compared to the other land types like woodlands and cultivated lands and mountain lands. So the population growth of the drylands is higher than in most all other lands on Earth. So here we see the inherent low productivity of the dryland, and the land users increase the productivity to above natural And this increase cause pressure, and the pressure increase and put them back to the natural. But the problem is that it is going back below the natural. And this is leading to reduction of the productivity. So this is again the persistent reduction of the inherent low productivity of the drylands. And it means that the people want to get more from the productivity, natural productivity of the land, of the dryland, but eventually they get less. And this we can call overexploitation, which is causing, which we actually causing, or we can call it desertification. This is the result of the overexploitation.
So the dynamics behind overexploitation and the outcomes of desertification and how they relate to both developed and developing countries is very important then to understand better. Can you tell us more about that?
Okay, let's see what are the desertification drivers and what are the outcomes. So one driver is overgrazing in the lands for grazing, and the other one is excessive firewood collection from plants of the land, and these together remove the vegetation cover of the land. And when the vegetation cover of the land is removed, we get what is called soil erosion. So this is one driver of desertification. And when the soil erosion is already occurring, the income of the herding, of the herders decline. The income of this way of living declines. Then the people that were herders start to make rangeland, not for the livestock, but rangeland cultivation. And the rangeland cultivation requires irrigation. And in most cases, many cases in the drylands, irrigation cause soil salinization. So these are the two features of desertification: soil salinization and soil erosion. And when this happens, it is also persistent. It is again persistent reduced productivity. And when it happens, people are lose any hope, and then they decide to irrigate even more and graze even more. And then it is even worse, of course. And the outcomes are that in the drylands is a very low, what is called human well-being, poverty, of course, and there are also conflicts and migrations, refugees, and so forth. So some, now we can see additional desertification outcomes. The income of land users in drylands relative to other lands are, as you see here. Drylands have the lowest GDP, and in most of the places on Earth, and also drylands population growth, as we saw already, is higher than population growth in other places. And also what you see here in the number of deaths of 1,000 live births, and we actually see here the mortality of children, of babies, that is very high in drylands. And we can see infant mortality in general, and mortality of infants under 5 years from hunger. And then when we put these two curves with the curves of desertification, we can see that indeed the desertification has something to cause these two features of infant mortality and under 5 years of hunger. Developing countries also have more drylands area in their territories than industrial countries have. You can see here the size of drylands developing countries in yellow, and the size of drylands in industrial countries, which is much lower. Each of them, the four of them, is much lower than in the developing countries. So developing countries simply have a lot of drylands, and it is for them not so good thing. And the opposite of this, and we look also on population size in drylands, we see that population in developing countries, most of the drylands that they have, and most of the people that they have, most of the drylands that they have most of their territory is dryland, and in the population size of drylands of developing is here, and of the industrial is here, and we see the same thing, that the proportion of people in the developing countries that live in deserts is very, very low, near zero, and in developing areas are much more than that. So this is the situation and the outcomes of desertification.
So we know that the ultimate results of desertification can be extensive and very, very harsh. Could you share with us examples of such extreme cases?
Yes, we have many examples, but we take two examples. One is these two illustrative cases indeed of desertification outcomes is the area, one of them was in the 30s and the other in the 70s. And you see here the map of the place of Oklahoma, which had what is called the Dust Bowl of the 30s. What you see here is not a fire, but it is not a dust. It is simply soil in the air. The soil that was in the air settled, and this is what you can see. Now, what happened here is that the market forces caused the people that lived in this area of Oklahoma, they convert the rangeland to croplands only because market forces. And then happened a drought. Drought was common there, but they did not think about it, that when they will not have a cover of the good cover of the land, like in grassland, then the drought is very bad. After drought, the crop plants died, and there was loss. The loss of the rangeland also didn't. The loss of the rangeland make the vegetation cover not available. So this is what caused the wind erosion and the dust. And what happened was that the productivity was totally lost, and this affected the people that they had to migrate and become refugees, and until the government engaged also in assistance with planting 200 million trees in this area, and training the farmers in land conservation measures. But the rehabilitation it was, but no restoration. Still, in these days, it is not as productive as it has been then. And then we can look at the Sahel, and the Sahel is this part of the Sahara, the southern part of the Sahara desert, as you see it here. And here we have the amount of rainfall above the annual mean of this area and below. So let us see, you see, we are here between 1,900 and 2,000 years, but let's look at the area that had this kind of rainfall, this kind of rainfall, amount rainfall below the mean. What we see is that the people were living really in a dry land. They were herds and have livestock, not much vegetation, but they lived from the livestock. But then, after this a certain period in the time, in the 2019 and 1920, then came another area, another climate, which was a huge amount of rainfall, huge. And therefore, what happened was that they deserted the livestock, or not used many livestock, and became farmers, and they cultivated their lands. So later, after this was what happened. It was a big drought, and this is what happened. And this is exactly like in Oklahoma. What we see is not market forces, but climate variability and also population growth, because when there was a lot of water, a lot of people out of the Sahel entered the Sahel in order to use this amount of lot of water, and the productivity that was very, very high because of that water then. But here again, there was the same thing, expansion of cultivation and livestock, and then came a drought, and then overexploitation of the wells. The overexploitation was also made possible by foreign assistance that was made more things that were not actually benefit and very bad. And then loss of crops and livestock, finally famine, and deaths of million people, and migration of refugees, 50 million. And there was, of course, a lot of efforts of foreign aid, but not enough. And the UN conference and programs were many, 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 until they managed to negotiate and have the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. The one that I also was part of the negotiation.
So obviously the outcomes of desertification can be altogether quite severe on many aspects, on the physical environment, on society itself, on the economy, and other forms of life. So what can be done in order to combat desertification effectively?
Here you see again what looked the Sahel after the crisis of desertification, huge desertification, and so many people died and immigrated. But what happened was that many, of course, as I showed, they starved, and many migrated, but some took initiative. And the initiative was, like you see, these people that they do something. They protected new saplings and surviving trees that survived the drought, and they managed to make saplings, and in these saplings have to be protected from grazing of people that came from outside, and from firewood gathering. And so good it was that you can here compare how it looked, certain area it looked in the 1975, and how you see in 2003. All the black dots are trees. And here you see also not only trees and cultivation. And this cultivation is in Niger. So within 30 years after the crisis in Niger, on 5 million hectares, they put 4 million farmers, and 20 million trees they planted, and 37 local species of these trees were 37 species were local, and to protect, and what they were doing is protected the crops from wind and increase the soil nitrogen by nitrogen fixation trees. And also this reduced the soil erosion, the trees, and it shortened time for wood gathering. And all of this was supporting cultivation of not just everything, but of wild plants of economic values. So we can say that there was here a sustainable harvest of forage and firewood 30 years after the crisis, which shows that yes, there can be done, things can be done. And also a part of this, there was an increase in carbon storage in the plants and in the soil of this area of this area. So there are also other options for successfully confronting desertification. For example, agriculture can be replaced by aquaculture. Why? Because when you have agriculture in the drylands, what happens is you always have of your evaporation, you lose water, and you always have to put back water. But the fish don't lose water by evapotranspiration at all. You simply cover the pool, and there is no transpiration. So you can see that if you want to generate from the land 1 kilogram of wheat in Australia, in a semi-arid area, you need 750 liters of water. But if you want to generate 1 kilogram of fish that is also in the drylands in this way, then only 50 liters of water are needed in an arid area in Israel, for example. And also there is a olive plantation that can be planted, and it is irrigated by the water that is used by the aquaculture. And here is a hyper-arid innovative aquaculture. It is an innovative aquaculture in a hyper-arid area. So you see here these tubes with red something in these tubes, and this is Hematococcus, make it red. Hematococcus is this unicellular green alga, and it generates color pigment that is called astaxanthin. And this is a fish feed additive for orange coloring salmon meats, and it is also good for other medical issues. And then it needs intense solar radiation for the cell, for the green cell, to produce this chemical, this pigment. And of course, this is also a way of using using the land of the dry land, using the force of the sun. So there are more, but it will be enough now.
So this may be a good, you mentioned already, maybe a good point now to turn to the global conventions on combating desertification, and tell us a little bit about what is the background of the convention, and in particular about the emergence of the concept of land degradation neutrality that now drives most of the programs behind it.
We ask indeed where and how much desertification there is in the drylands. So here the gray is non-drylands, the yellow is drylands, but the red within the yellow is those that are desertified. And what we know now, more or less, the 23 or something like this of dryland area, excluding the deserts, are already degraded. The deserts are not degraded. And not only are already degraded, but all the time there is a newly degraded lands are accumulating. For example, 4% to 10% of potential productivity of used lands was lost annually in the years 1981 and 2003. Take, for example, an area that is very red. You can see that all kind of desertification impact. The most red is the most desertification. So takes this one and see where it is on the map. And this is the fertile crescents of the two, between the two rivers of Mesopotamia. And this fertile crescent, as we see now on top of it, we can call it now desertification crescent. It is the highest desertification in the region. And this is, as you know, it is the cradle of agriculture in the old world 10,000 years ago. And it is underused ever since. And maybe it was exhausted by now to have this in 10,000 years of agriculture, the desertification entered in. So what we can't say, we can't do nothing and say that it is, maybe it was exhausted, but maybe, or it is indicating that we can have to admit that totally arresting desertification totally may not be achievable. Or it may be another option that the UN Convention to Combat Desertification did not succeed. So the answer for it was given by this person, Luke Nyakaja, that was the UN Executive Secretary as of year 2007. And he answered this question, is it possible that the UN Convention to Combat Desertification did not succeed? And he said, yes. But he also said, why? And the why was this, that the convention was restricted to drylands, whereas land degradation, which means loss of productivity, persistent loss of productivity too, is global, not only in drylands. This was one reason why it did not succeed. And the other thing is that the whole decade of combating desertification by according to the UNCCD, showed that indeed total eradication is not achievable, but at least some of the degraded lands can be restored. Hence, striving for combating desertification could be replaced by focusing on tangible target, achieving land degradation neutrality, which is now developing sustainability development goal number 15 of the UN that says that by 2030, we will restore degraded land and strive to achieve a land degradation neutral world. And then they call it LDN. Let's look here. These are lands. This is also in northern Negev of Israel that are already degraded. You know that. You see how it is. But there are also next to them to this land of degrading use. How we know that it is degrading use? I don't want to enter, but it is a big story, but it is a degrading use. And who owns the land? It is the Bedouins that live, for example, in this village around them. And they have these lands that are, as we have seen, under degrading use and already degraded. So we need to think and to realize what to do that the amount of non-degrading land in their area decrease, they feel it. And on the other hand, there is a demand for non-degraded land because it is increasing, because the demand is increasing, because the population is increasing also. So therefore, we have to tell them that don't give up already degraded land, because it is a land of a potential productivity, and therefore it can be restored if we invest in restoration. So the issue, the idea of the LDN is that the people will need to anticipate losses. Means, yes, you know, whatever you will do, maybe some of it will be degradation. So you will do also newly degraded area. But also you have to plan that you have to plan gains, because you know that you lose because you do it as you did always, but now you have to do something that you have to plan the restoration, to plan restoring already degraded area. And then you have to reach a level like this, on this level, that it is a balance and there is no net loss, which means that the amount of non-degraded land is becoming stable. So at least it will become stable in this area, and hopefully it will spread over the whole world. So here we have, if they will manage to do this, and they will have the amount of newly degraded area offsetted by restoring the amount of restoring already degraded area, this would be for them the local of the areas, their area, the local land degradation neutrality would have been achieved. Now I want only to add something about causes of desertification that we have to also be aware of. Climate change changed values of the aridity indices in the lands of Sicily. Then there it was studied very well. This is such that the climate of non-drylands of Sicily, that were non-drylands in 1931 until 1960, they had also a dry subhumid land and a little semi-arid land. In 1961, 2000, already the non-dryland area was shortened, was squeezed, and the dry subhumid became huge, and the semi-arid also increased. There is an issue of climate change that related also to desertification.
Uriel, before moving to the next topic, I just wanted to make one comment in relation to land degradation and ecosystem restoration. You know very well the labs are the Sustainability Laboratories Project Wadi Atir, which is in the northern part of the Negev. And I think there we have addressed that issue quite successfully, although in a relatively small area, by demonstrating how massive planting, a combination of massive planting, rainwater harvesting, and controlling the flow of water on the site really can bring about very, very quick restoration. It actually was surprising how quick and relatively economic it was. But let's move on to another topic, which is of great importance. You already referred to the climate change convention, and it would appear that all the very vexing issues of all three global conventions, climate change, biodiversity, and combating desertification, are very much interrelated. Could you take us through this intricate interrelationship?
Yes, surely, but I want also to comment that really what you did in Wadi Atir is restoration, and this is what the emphasis now is avoiding land degradation, but restoring the land. So this is excellent. Okay, so let's see about what is the interactions between the three phenomena or the three processes: desertification, climate change, and biodiversity loss. We can show it in that all the arrows here in two nested circles. and nested in a big circle. So let us try from here. Soil erosion, as we've seen, reduces the productivity, and this is called desertification. Okay, but then the reduced productivity also reduce the carbon fixation and the sequestration of the carbon. And this is a part of the climate change issue. And then climate change in species, cause changes in species composition and in population sizes. And then this causes biodiversity, not biodiversity loss, which means also ecosystem services loss. And this loss is also including the reduced flow of the supporting services, the most important ones in the photosynthesis and nutrient cycling. And then this reduced flow of supporting services is already go back to desertification. But if we go back to biodiversity in the inner circle, biodiversity reduce the structural biodiversity loss, reduce the structural diversity of plant land cover, which is the most important thing, plant cover by biodiversity, plant biodiversity, and the loss of soil conservation service also, because if there is no land cover, there is a loss of soil conservation. And also it is causing soil erosion, and we are back here. And then from here, we go back to loss of nutrients and soil moisture. And this causes also loss of biodiversity. Let us go to the left circle. We see that climate change caused the increased frequency of droughts and floods and fires. And all these are causing soil erosion. And again, soil erosion reduce carbon storage and increase the emission. And the emission, of course, the emission, increasing emission, increase climate change. So now we go back to desertification, and this is the last arrow that we see here. And we can say that desertification, climate change, and biodiversity loss are mutually reinforcing nested feedback loops. And this is calling the three conventions to start to work synergistically. That's it. Thank you.
Uriel, this is fantastic. This is fascinating. And unfortunately, all these dynamics and all this intricate interrelationship, not only in this last diagram, but many of the others are not really well understood, even by the well-informed public, which is a big issue. But you have occupied a very unusual position in straddling the world of the science, the research, the policy, and the international decision-making. How do you see things from that perspective, the 30,000 feet perspective? Are we moving in the right direction? Are things progressing well? If not, what do you think should be done?
Okay, look, in some of the issues that I dealt with in this presentation, there was human density. And this is the root case that we have to know how to control or manage the population size of the globe, of the human being. Because I think the human species is the only species on Earth that is that has such a huge growth and intensive and consistent growth. And it can be done in different ways, and then also, which is more easier, it is necessary to control our need for the land resources, because if we take away the land resources, we have we lose the biodiversity. And then I can tell you again, going back to all these three circles that are that I showed you just now. Very, very simple. Just everything that we want to do, we can take these three circles and see where we are there and what we can do there.
Well, I hope humanity will rise to this challenge, and that it will be able to take advantage of all the knowledge that you and your colleagues have put forth. Thank you very much, Uriel.